Now that you have successfully built the chassis of your car, it's time to move on to building a body. Looking at the chassis that you've built, although it looks like a car and the wheels go round, it's all rather square, boxy and not very aerodynamic. By adding a body on top of the chassis, hopefully we can make it more aerodynamic and get it to travel along the racetrack at a faster speed. This film will show you two different body designs being added to the chassis. The first one is a little bit like a Formula 1 racing car and was constructed taking two-dimensional images of a body design made by Denford Limited as a starting point. Denford is the company that runs the F1 in Schools competition. The second body is one that I dreamt up of all on my own, and it very loosely takes inspiration from the sort of cars that take part in the Le Mans 24-hour race. Initially, the designs for the bodies were drawn on graph paper before scanning them into a computer and converting them to computer images using Photoshop. The designs have been printed on card to give them a little more strength than they would have if paper was used. The black lines in the designs need to be cut, whereas the red lines are for folding. We'll start by making the Formula 1 style body. The first job is to carefully cut out all of the component parts of the body. If you take the care needed to do a decent job of cutting out, it should take quite a while. The cutting needs to be as accurate as you can get it to build and fit the body well, so take your time. Some of the cutting is a bit fiddly, for example where holes have to be cut in the middle of the body. But a bit of care and taking your time will result in a good enough job. There are four parts to the F1 style body: the main body, the air intake, the front wing and the rear wing. Once all of the components have been cut out, the next job is to score along the red lines ready for folding. I used a cutting mat to lean on, but you could lean on a piece of card if you don't have a cutting mat. Obviously, you need to take care doing the scoring, as it is done using the open blades of scissors, and no one wants to have blood on their cars. So take your time to line the ruler up with the lines and don't press too hard. Scoring is meant to make the folding easier, not to cut right through the card. There may be a little more cutting to do when you've completed the scoring. Black lines that are not part of a component's outline but still need cutting to allow it to fit round the chassis of the car. Once you've cut out all four sections of the body and scored the fold lines, you can start to fix it to the chassis of the car. It's a relatively straightforward process to attach the body to the chassis. With the folds made on the red lines and using sticky tape and a glue stick, work can begin. The speeded up footage shows the process clearly enough that detailed explanation is not necessary. Notice, however, that as the construction proceeds, it is necessary to alter the body in order to improve its fit on the chassis. The rear of the body is fitted first, with glue applied to the side that will make contact with the chassis. The propulsion tube fits through the hole in the chassis and the sides of the body slide behind the axle bushes. As you can see, this can be fiddly. More glue is applied at the front of the body and the tabs underneath are glued to the underside of the car. The glue is later reinforced with sticky tape. The tabs are trimmed so that they fit alongside the guideline tube. The central tabs are also trimmed, then glued and taped to the underside of the car. The air inlet is folded to a point, then glued onto the top of the body. Sticky tape was used to reinforce the bond. The front wing is folded and a triangular profiled wedge is formed and glued at each end. It is fixed to the front of the car by sliding it under the guideline tube and body. Part of it is also glued to the front of the car. The design of the front wing has been considerably improved, as the version in this film very nearly broke due to slots cut into it. The rear wing is folded and then, with its sides sliding behind the axle bushes, it is glued to the chassis. After refitting the axles and wheels and giving the car a check over to make sure everything is securely attached, it is complete and ready to race. As with the Formula 1 style body, the first stage of constructing the Le Mans inspired body is to carefully cut out the 4 component parts and then score along the red lines. First, the cutting. This body is considerably less complicated to cut out. There are 4 components in this design: the front, the rear and 2 wheel arches. Then the red lines are scored. An additional cut is required on each wheel arch. The front section folds over to create a wedge. Tabs fold over and are glued to form sides. A wedge is also formed with the rear section. The tabs are glued to give the wedge strength. The 2 wheel arches are folded, tabs are glued and stuck to form a 3-dimensional triangular shape that will sit over the front wheels. With all 4 sections of the body constructed, they can now be added to the chassis. The wedge at the front of the body sits over the chassis nose. The bottom edge of it slides above the guideline tube. It's glued down both on the top of and underneath the chassis. Glue is applied to the central panels of the body. These are stuck down on the underside of the chassis. The rear panel fits over the back of the car so that the propulsion tube fits through the hole in the panel, and the tabs are glued and taped to the bottom of the chassis. Being careful not to squash the wedge, the front of the rear panel is glued and taped to the front panel. Finally, the wheel arches are glued and taped onto the top of the body, one over each of the car's front wheels. A little bit of trimming, extra sticky tape, and a final check over to make sure everything is securely attached, the car is now complete and ready to race.